Welcome everyone. Today we'll explore how schema therapy helps us and our clients bounce back in a world that often feels off balance. Take a moment to think of the last time you felt overstretched. Resilience isn't about hardening, it's about staying flexible. Schema therapy gives us a roadmap to do just that by understanding what happens when our core needs aren't met and how to repair that in therapy. My name is Nehal Abdelazim-Horstmann. I'm a consultant psychiatrist and psychotherapist, ISST Advanced Certified Schema Therapist, and this is our roadmap for today. Let us start by looking at the world we live in. Stress is no longer the exception, it is the norm. Every week, we see people touched by uncertainty, war, displacement, economic strain, social fragmentation. For many, especially in the global south and diaspora, uncertainty isn't a crisis anymore, it's just the background noise of our daily life. And in parallel, we live in a permanently on culture. Phones, alerts, deadlines, an unending current. People come to therapy drained by the space. Chronic overstimulation reshapes us, our attention, our patience, our sense of connection. Notice how your own focus shifts throughout the day, from calm to tense, from engagement to withdrawal. Schema therapy helps us identify how we react to this constant overload in functional, meaning helpful, or dysfunctional, unhelpful ways. So if modern life keeps us permanently switched on, we need frameworks that explain why our minds repeat the same emotional reactions and how we can respond differently. Schema therapy, developed by Jeff Young in the 90s, began as a way to help people who didn't improve with standard cognitive behavioral therapy. But over the past 30 years, research has shown that schema therapy does more than treat symptoms. It helps people understand the emotional themes or patterns that shape their lives, and we call these schemas. That's why schema therapy feels very relevant now. When the world keeps triggering uncertainty and overload, schema therapy gives both therapist and client a shared language, so we can see which part of us is reacting, to understand what that part is protecting, and to build the psychological flexibility that we call resilience. Growing up in Cairo in the early 90s, everybody knew the love story of Mona and Ahmed. That's from the movie called More Precious Than My Own Life. So let me introduce you to Mona and Ahmed of today, 2025. I'm sure this fictional case example will resonate with many of you practicing the Middle East and North Africa. So Mona is 38. She's a former engineer who gave up her career 12 years ago to raise 3 children and care for her aging parents. She pours her heart into every task, cooking, tutoring, driving to appointments, yet she describes herself as empty inside. She longs for Ahmed's attention, but feels unseen. Ahmed, a 40-year-old corporate manager, works 60 plus hours a week. He comes home exhausted, craving affection, but thinks, a man shouldn't have to ask for that. He feels he's failing everyone. Their pain is real, but their love story is also real. Yet they are drifting apart in roles that both believe are virtues. So where did this pattern begin? If we look at Mona's childhood at age 5, she had to be the little helper because her mom fell ill. Her father, scarred by his own childhood struggles, praised her sacrifice. Big girls don't cry, she learned. Your worth equals your service. So Mona has developed the both schemas of self-sacrifice, my needs come last, I earn love by giving to others, and emotional deprivation. If I ask for care, I'm selfish. Ahmed's father echoed his own father's colonial-era lessons. His grandfather survived famine and war, was a really strong man. He had to man up through hardship. By age 4, Ahmed had already heard, real men don't cry. In Arabic, استرجل. He learned feelings are a luxury he couldn't afford. Achievement is survival. And you could detect schemas of unrelenting standards, emotional inhibition, and defectiveness and shame. So their schemas were inherited messages about worth, service, and survival that were culturally reinforced and initially helpful and adaptive. So schemas drive modes. Those are emotional states that hijack us under stress. Schemas are deeply rooted patterns, stories we learned about what it means to be loved, safe, worthy, and under stress, these stories come alive through modes, the parts of us that submit, attack, or withdraw. Here's an example of how this plays out with Ahmad and Mona. Ahmad arrives home exhausted. He switches to the detached protector and plays with his phone. Mona greets him with service. His shirts are lining up, food is ready. She overcompensates in hope that she gets the love she needs. None of them gets their needs met. They switch to the inner critic, and they both end up withdrawing, leading to avoidance. What's hidden beneath this behavior are two vulnerable children longing for connection. Neither of them gets what they really need. Their schemas create this disconnection and isolation. So to summarize and simplify, this is a map of the dysfunctional coping that explains interpersonal and interrelational conflicts. Unmet emotional needs lead to negative beliefs about oneself and about the other person, which lead to maladaptive behavior, which eventually escalates to a conflict with a partner or an interpersonal problem, which deepens the unmet emotional needs, and this vicious cycle in relationships keeps going on. Moving on, what's the hidden story of emotional codes? Many Egyptian, Middle Eastern clients grew up hearing phrases like man up or don't cry. These messages don't come from coldness, they come from love mixed with fear. Families teach emotional control because they believe it protects you from shame, from social judgment, from appearing weak. For women, the message is different, but just as demanding. Patience, harmony, sacrifice, sabr. Together, these values form an emotional code that prizes endurance over expression. And while this code fosters loyalty and strength, it can also create inner loneliness and guilt when emotions inevitably surface. A study from Lebanon showed that 42% of Arab men report depressive symptoms, yet men are far less likely to seek help. 62% of adolescents and young adults associate vulnerability with weakness. Emotional expression is marked as crybaby or soft, and masculinity becomes defined by control, not awareness. What you see in this picture, this is actually a well-preserved tomb painting from ancient Egypt showing a funeral mourning scene. When someone of great status passes, people would hire professionals to encourage the family to show sadness and grief. So we see women in white dresses raising hands in grief and sadness. This indicates that our ancestors knew emotions are human, not weakness. Grief was public, was an acceptable expression, and this is exactly opposite to the modern suffer in silence norms. Let's even have this radical counterpart to this assumption. This was once one of the most powerful men alive, the pharaoh Akhenaten. It shows him with his wife, Queen Nefertiti, in an intimate, emotionally expressive family scene. They're seated face to face, holding and tenderly engaging with their 3 daughters. This shows that ancient Egyptian kings and queens did express warmth, affection, and emotional connection openly, which raises the question: what happened to Mona and Ahmed? And are they even Egyptians? What shaped and caused their disconnection? The caricature is from a famous historian's book, Jalal Amin, about whatever happened to the Egyptian, documenting what happened in modern Egyptian history. And to understand why emotion and restraint carry such moral weight in Egyptian lives today, we need to pause at history, especially the colonial era. During the late 19th and early 20th century, the British colonial rule didn't just control land, it also sought to redefine what it meant to be civilized. Western ideals of composure, rationality, and emotional restraint were promoted as signs of progress, and these ideas merged with existing local values of dignity and honor. Egyptian men were encouraged to be controlled, the rational protector of a family and nation. And women, on the other hand, were expected to embody patience and purity, emotional anchors of moral strength. As Galal Amin noted, the family became the last refuge of autonomy under foreign dominance. Discipline and emotional control were ways to preserve dignity when freedom was restricted. Over generations, these social codes turned inward, so emotional restraint, once a survival skill, under occupation, became an emotional rule. I must not show weakness, I must hold my family together. These unheard messages still echo today. In schema therapy, they often appear as unrelenting standards and self-sacrifice or emotional inhibition schemas, born not from individual failure, as I would suggest, but from a collective effort to survive under pressure. So schema therapy's first task becomes to recognize these patterns, these schemas, as social constructs, not personality flaws, and to offer a language for safe, flexible emotional expression. Talking about emotional flexibility, and before going back to Mona and Ahmed, I'd like to briefly talk about the construct of resilience, because it's an interesting concept gaining lots of attention among American and European researchers at the moment. So what is resilience? The diamond in the rough. This plant you see here on the PowerPoint is growing between the cracks. The word resilience originally came from material science and physics, the ability of a metal or a fabric to spring back into shape after pressure. But people aren't metal. We don't just snap back. We adapt, we learn, and sometimes transform. Psychologically, resilience is the capacity to maintain or regain well-being despite adversity. Early researchers treated resilience as an outcome, as if some people were simply lucky to be born resilient and others not. But the newer evidence tells a different story. Resilience is a dynamic process, as proven by Southwick and Carney in 2018. Resilience is shaped by relationships, by context and time. It can grow and it can fade. Think of coping as a sprint and resilience as a marathon. Coping helps you survive a crisis. Resilience helps you sustain life after the crisis. When schemas lock us into rigid, reactive patterns, avoidance, self-attack, perfectionism as modes, we lose that flexibility. The therapy's role in this case is to reopen that movement, that flexibility, and help clients meet new stress without collapsing into old scripts. Resilience then is less about toughness and more about flexibility, about bouncing back into shape under pressure. One of the strongest pieces of evidence on resilience comes from the Kauai longitudinal study by Emmy Werner and Ruth Smith. Starting in 1955, they followed 505 children on the Hawaiian island of Kauai from birth through mid-adulthood. About 2/3 of these children grew up with significant risks: poverty, family instability, parental illness, and even early trauma. And as expected, many of these children developed learning or behavioral problems, but a third did not. These children, despite comparable stress, became competent, confident, and caring adults. The researchers asked why. They found 3 protective factors that consistently predicted healthy development. The first one was personal qualities, temperament, an active, adaptable temperament, and a tendency to engage rather than withdraw. The second was a secure bond, at least one, just one stable, supportive relationship, a grandparent, a teacher, a neighbor who provided constant care and modeled problem solving. Third is a supportive community, a sense of meaning and responsibility, going through school, work, or community involvement. So they concluded that resilience is not a rare trait, but a process built in relationships, depends on connection, guidance, and the opportunity to contribute. So if supportive relationships build resilience, what happens when those needs go unmet? In schema therapy, unmet emotional needs form lasting templates, schemas that shape how we understand love, safety, and identity. From early on, every child asks, will someone come when I cry? Is it safe to be myself? Do I have to earn love through achievement or obedience? And when expression is discouraged, children adapt. They learn quiet rules. I must stay strong. I'm not allowed to fail. These rules often reflect cultural values, endurance, respect, family honor, that once ensured belonging and survival. But when they harden these schemas, what once protected the child can confine the adult. Self-discipline becomes self-criticism. Respect becomes silence. Therapy doesn't erase these patterns, it just loosens them, restoring flexibility so we can face new stress without repeating old rules. And that flexibility, the ability to bend without breaking, is what resilience truly means. The slide shows the 5 core emotional needs. There were more needs that were conceptualized as important in childhood. We won't get into that into detail today. So the second task for schema therapy is to build those protective bonds inside the self through the healthy adult mode and outside through safe, supportive relationships. So how do we do that exactly with Mona and Ahmed? One example of a very powerful technique and tool in schema therapy, being an emotion-focused intervention, is imagery rescripting. I will not be going into the detail of how to do that in therapy, but the basic idea is to heal the old wounds, to empower Mona and Ahmed each to repair their relationship to their inner child. That's basically a metaphor for the emotional part of self, and take responsibility of their own feelings, thoughts, and actions. An example would be the adult Mona talking to her 5-year-old self, saying, my dear, you've been caring so much for so long. You don't have to do it alone anymore. I'm here with you now. You can rest. It's safe to have needs, and you deserve care just as much as you give it. And in the case of Ahmed, his adult self would step up and try and be there. Maybe not protect, because it takes a lot of work to be able to achieve that, but to just show that I'm here now. You don't have to face those words, harsh words alone. It's okay to feel sad, and it's okay to cry. Even prophets wept. Your tears don't make you weak, they make you human. Real strength is being able to feel and stay kind. So in practice, reframing means translating emotion into language that feels culturally congruent. So for Mona, a reframed belief of service means love can be placed as love can include rest. And the intervention that would help reach this conclusion can be through imagery rescripting or a lot of limited reparenting, which means that the therapist showing an empathetic, compassionate position that empowers Mona into believing that it is okay to take time for yourself and to take care of yourself and to show weakness even. So the mode reframe in this case would be that the inner critic is not really helping me, but the healthy adult is trying to. He says, you deserve care too, you deserve rest too. Ahmad's work is the reframing the belief of strength means silence, or strength includes honesty. And we can do this as well through eliciting compassion, using imagery rescripting. And in this case, the punitive parent, which we also call the inner critic, can be framed as the healthy adult that is protective, that is mentoring, that says it's okay to feel and still be successful. One idea that I like to use is to spend 5 or 10 minutes per day and ask, really, what did your heart carry today? Each would try to share what's been on their mind and what needs do they have, what do they need met from their partners, which builds emotional literacy and builds healthy adult communication, gradually replacing this culture of silent endurance with shared reflection. Here are a few ways to use the healthy adult mode through cultural wisdom. For example, the values or the characteristics of a healthy adult mode would be, for example, balance, توازن, to replace the either or the black and white by both and. For example, to honor family duties and personal needs, to be strong and accept and appreciate vulnerability and when someone else is showing vulnerability, to serve others and still care for yourself at the same time. A second example is the emotional honesty. Spiritual traditions model this in several religions. One example is the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who cried at his son's funeral, at his death, saying, "The heart grieves and the eye sheds tears." Prophet Jacob wept until he lost his eyesight over his son, whom he assumed dead, showing grief and loss. I like to use these examples with patients who value religion and who are religious and practicing, because for them this is a very powerful example that men are still considered strong even if they do show vulnerability and emotion and sadness. Interdependence is also one important value and characteristic of the healthy adult, that we need each other, that it is human to be interdependent of another person, especially in collectivist cultures. You could also advocate for being a strong individual would eventually create a stronger family and a stronger community. One quote I like is by Ibn Khaldun that goes, "Humans are social by nature. الإنسان مدني بطبعه." So adapting with dignity and flexibility and resiliency. You can use, again, the example of Akhenaten as both powerful pharaoh and tender father. Both roles can coexist. And with hardship comes ease, which is a verse from the Quran, إِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. Circumstances change, but we are blessed with the ability to adapt. So I reached my final slide, and I would like to reflect with you on how traditional schema therapy would externalize and maybe confront punitive modes, the inner critic. In my experience with culturally affirmative work, that it was very helpful to first contextualize those punitive modes and understand their historic and moral origins before starting to really change and transform them. So the aim is still to disempower self-punishment and restore compassionate self-leadership, but the path honors cultural narratives of respect and continuity. So resilience is inherited, but it can evolve. It's a dynamic process. Schemas are survival maps, not destiny. The healthy adult mode bridges heritage and healing. We inherit not only wounds, but also wisdom. Resilience grows when we learn which is which. Our work is not to erase history, but to bring compassion to that strength, and softness can coexist. With that, I have reached the end of my talk today. I'd like to thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to receive your questions via LinkedIn. You can scan this QR code and drop me a line introducing yourself, sharing questions, feedback, critique, your own experiences. I'd really love to hear about how it's been like for you practicing schema therapy within diverse communities coming from different cultural backgrounds. This is an area I'm extremely passionate about, and I'm very happy to collaborate with others practicing in other countries or similar countries. If you're in Switzerland or in Zurich, I'm happy to even maybe meet up for coffee. Enjoy the rest of the activities of the World Schema Therapy Day today, and let's stay in touch. Have a good day.